This our usual chair, I don't think it's right now, so it's vice chair, I'll be presiding over this body, I suppose. Start with attendance, get roll call, please.
Yeah. James Freeze, not present. Mr. Chambers with Charlottesville.
Present.
Mr. Stolzenberg with Charlottesville. Ms. Hirsch-Valerie with Albemarle. Here. Mr. Karina Plunn with Albemarle.
Here.
Mr. Carazana with Albemarle.
Here.
Mr. Proctor with VDOT. Online.
I'm here virtually.
Ms. Jacobs with the TJPDC. Here. Mr. Espy with Jaunt.
Present.
Mr. Palmer with UVA.
Here.
Mr. Wagner with DRPT.
Here.
Also online. Ms. Pennington with Rideshare. FHWA is not here, and Mr. Safranek.
Present.
Okay. For the PDC staff, Ms. Shackelford, I am here. Ms. Shannon. Here. Ms. Thomas. Here. Mr. Scarpinato.
Here.
Ms. Emmerich. Is here. And then also joining us today are Will Cockrell and Alan Simpson with EPR.
Hello. Hi.
Any matters? We'll be here actually.
Rory's joining us online.
You know, one insurer right now. Be awesome.
Barrick, since we have a couple people who are online, you can ask for a vote for them to participate remotely. They just have to state generally why they are participating remotely.
So I just ask, they can, don't want to be.
Ask them if they want to state why they need to participate remotely, and then motion for somebody to allow them to participate remotely.
For people online on Zoom, please state why you are and your general location, and then we can have a roll call to determine yes or no to participate remotely. Start with Rory, I guess.
Hey everybody, I am currently out of the country in Mexico, so I'll be remote.
I think good reason. Will.
Will is not on the committee.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
It's just Rory.
And Daniel and Garland and Chuck.
Okay, I'll go Chuck then.
That me?
Yeah.
Yes, I've got conflicts today and I definitely meet the more than 50 miles away rule. But yes, I've got a conflict. Actually, I had to reschedule one meeting so I could actually attend right now. So, but I had a meeting already that just ended that I had a conflict with. So.
And you're in Culpeper?
I'm in Culpeper in my office.
Garland?
I actually had a conflict also. I got double booked. I have another meeting that's I need to be at 11:15, so I'll have to leave here then.
Great. And Daniel?
Hey everyone, sorry I couldn't make it in today. I'm at my office in Richmond. We are a one-car household and that car needed to be used for childcare purposes this morning.
This motion to participate. So moved.
Second.
Get roll. Or everyone who approves the aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, did that, cool. Members of the public, anyone who is joining us online or in person, state anything? All right, well, hold your peace. Next is general administration, Sandy Shackelford, acceptance of agenda.
Yep. Just need a motion to accept the agenda unless there are any changes.
The agenda, so moved.
Second.
Everyone in favor? Aye. Anyone against? Cool. That hearing 16, and now we're on smart scale round 6.
Oh, we need to approve the meeting minutes.
Oh, you're right. Motion to approve meeting minutes.
Second.
Everyone for? No against, cool. Okay, I think now we're good. We're smart balances.
Yep. All right. So we've been talking about smart scale for a while now, so this shouldn't become any surprise to you, but we do need to finalize the projects that the MPO will be submitting. So I'm going to just review these very high level, and then if you have any specific questions about any of the projects that we're not recommending moving forward, we can talk about those. We will be asking for general consensus from the MPO Policy Board at their meeting next week, just to get confirmation that this is what we're going to work to develop. And then Chuck is going to review some updates from the pipeline projects after this. So all of the projects that we have been considering for the MPO as eligible applications are listed here. And then we've been working both with the localities and then also with VDOT to determine which projects are going to be ready to move forward. We've been discussing an interchange improvement. Specifically, potentially, we're looking at a diverging diamond interchange at I-64 and 5th Street. I think the alternatives analysis will determine whether or not the DDI is the best improvement or there's another improvement that might be preferred. So we're recommending submitting that as an application by the MPO. There was also the pipeline study that was completed in the previous round for Peter Jefferson Parkway and pedestrian improvements at Rolkin Road. We're recommending that that be submitted by the MPO as a project bundle. And then we're going to be able, we believe, to submit one of the alternatives that are identified through the final stages of the pipeline project that's currently in place for US 250 and Barracks Road. Chuck's going to review what those alternatives are in just a minute, and we'll be asking for consensus from the policy board and a recommendation from you all next month. As you all know, there's the second pipeline study, the Ivy Road Improvement project. We just don't anticipate that that's going to be ready in time for us to develop an application. So we are not going to move forward with planning to submit that as part of a round 6 application at this time. We had already talked about the Hillsdale South extension, and it's just not at a state of project readiness where that one's going to be ready to move forward, but we can absolutely consider that as a future smart scale application and determine what steps need to be taken to prepare that one for submission in a future round. And then there was the second pipeline study that was completed in the previous round of smart scale, which would be a project bundle for improvements at Louisa Road and also at Milton Road. This is out in the Shadwell area, further out on 250 East. There's nothing that's preventing us from submitting this as an application, except that it didn't score well, and it might not be a good use of staff resources to develop that into a second application. And so at this point, we would not be recommending moving forward with that one. But that is where we are. So we don't need necessarily a formal motion, but we can have some discussion, and we would like to hear general consensus on whether these are the right projects to be moving forward with right now. And really, I think that the discussion might be related to removing any of these or potentially seeing if there are still opportunities at Louisa Road or Milton Road to move forward with that project. Those would probably be the two options. And then after our discussion, Chuck can talk a little bit more about the pipeline studies and where we are on those.
We might need that update before we make the decision on whether to keep in the Barracks Road one.
Okay. So are there questions about any of the other ones, or do you want to move on to that discussion first?
Were we able to incorporate any bike ped improvements north of 5th Street Station Parkway into the DDI?
North, that's a good one.
I think we're waiting to see the sketch from
Yeah,
Chip's team.
we don't know exactly yet.
It was requested.
Yes, we are considering that. I don't know if we're gonna go all the way to Stagecoach Road or to 5th Street Station Parkway, but we're actually looking at crossing getting across 64 as part of our analysis.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, Chuck, why don't you go ahead and go through the Barracks Road update, or you can go through Ivy if you would like to as well. Do you want me to share the slides, or do you want to share them from your screen?
Probably easier because the bandwidth might be kind of
Okay,
difficult for the visuals on some of these, so.
okay, let me get down to those. I can find my. All right, whenever you're ready.
All right, keep going. Okay, Barracks Road, like I said, this goes from Georgetown all the way to Emmett Street. And we are actually going out to public survey starting Friday, so look for that. And we should be having advertisements and stuff going out this week for that survey to go live. It's like I said, it's going live on Friday and it'll run through the 8th, I think. The first, and these are basically the visualizations out of the survey that I'm going to present you and go through it with you. For Georgetown Road intersection, we're only considering a roundabout option at this location with crosswalks at the intersection to address some of the safety and operations impacts at this. For this option, we're showing a shared use path on the south side of Georgetown, heading eastward. So that's basically for Georgetown, that's what we're looking at for that location. The next slide is, this is the corridor. We are looking at for this closing the crossovers along the corridor, reducing the median width, and that'll give us enough room on the south side of the road to actually shift the lanes over and put a shared use path on the south side of the road without having significantly impact on these properties on the south side of Barracks Road. The other option we have for the corridor is just doing infill sidewalk if we didn't do the shared use path and close the median. So that's the alternative for that corridor. Now, if you go to the interchange, which is next slide, the one scenario, like I said, it shows the shared use path going through, but it's looking at double roundabouts for the interchange terminal ramps. And by doing the roundabouts, we can actually reduce the laneage underneath the bridge, and that would accommodate us adding a shared use path underneath the bridge. Because we don't need as many, because of the operations, we don't need 2 lanes underneath in the eastbound direction because we're not having to stop traffic at the signals. And that would continue east. The other alternatives we have for the interchange is, this was previously developed, but it would be the sidewalk, but we're adding a right turn lane on the eastbound approach to the southbound on-ramps. So basically just adding that right turn lane and putting in the sidewalk. For the other ramp, we're looking at dual lefts and extension of the deceleration lane on the 250 bypass. So this, if we didn't want to do the roundabouts, this would be the other option. The only thing drawback to this is there's not a lot of space underneath these bridges, so we wouldn't be able to accommodate a shared use path underneath the bridges. And the sidewalk there is very narrow. It's 5 feet wide from the face of curb to the piers. So you don't have a lot of room in there, and that would just be what it is. We wouldn't be able to make any improvements to that. The next slide is on the eastern portion, we would look at installing a shared use path from the interchange all the way to Emmett Street. It would connect to the Ravenna River and then tie into the projects that are already funded on the Emmett Street Barracks Road intersection. So that's pretty much what the survey is going to entail. Are there any questions?
What's the timing on the survey? I know we started this week, but how long is it going to go for?
The survey is going to start on the 23rd and run till the 8th. So to be basically start Friday and run for 2 weeks.
And just so you all are aware, we would need to submit the pre-applications for Smart Scale, have to be submitted April 1st. So we would need to determine which concepts we would want to move forward with the application next month.
Hey Chuck, the first slide showed a shared use path also going north at Georgetown. How far does that go?
I don't think it shows shared use path. The shared use path is the red portion that's shown on this slide. The other parts are just sidewalk. There's currently an existing sidewalk on the north side of Georgetown Road. And we would basically not bother that. I mean, at the intersection, we would actually make the improvements to accommodate the roundabout, but we would put back the sidewalk. But the shared use path is currently just on the south side.
Okay.
I know when I basically had a meeting with Diantha McKeely from the county a couple weeks ago, and I showed her these presentations, and she was really happy about what we were proposing to do, especially with these options. Her biggest comment was, can you extend it to the east all the way to the developments? Forget the name of the development on the south side of Garth Road to the or the Barracks Road to the east or to the west. And looking at it, I think it's too far beyond the scope of this project. We're mainly focused on the intersection to the east. I will say that there's been a lot of questions have come up about roundabouts and the crossings, and we will look at those. And whether we need to include rapid flashing beacons or some sort of mechanism to alert the traffic that there is a crossing here. Definitely at the interchange, we will make that evaluation and determination when we get into the design of the concept for the application.
Chuck, I'm curious, what's driving the need for this Georgetown roundabout to be 2 lanes on that southern part? It looks like it's 1 lane feeding in from the west side of Barracks and from Georgetown.
It's the way the roundabouts work because of the southbound left turn lane is so heavy that you need 2 lanes in the eastbound direction. Otherwise, you have a lot of queuing in the eastbound direction because the southbound left basically doesn't have a lot of conflicting movements. So that volume is so heavy that it actually cuts that eastbound movement off. Because once the car gets into the circulating lane, that's the controlling factor in how a roundabout operates. So you need 2 lanes to accommodate that eastbound traffic in the roundabout. Otherwise, you get extensive delays and queuing.
Okay.
Chuck, what's the diameter of the roundabout for Georgetown intersection?
Generally, they're 140 feet base. This one's probably closer to 160. And if you add the slip lanes diameter to the diameter, it's probably going to be closer to 180, 190 feet. But just it depends. Once we get into design, we'll have a better idea.
What's the size of the shared use path on the south side?
I can't remember if we were looking at a 8-foot or 10-foot.
Chuck, I have a question. Is there a minimum traffic count that warrants a slip lane? Or
It's more of an operational criteria. We basically go through an iterative process when we're developing roundabouts, and we look at how we can actually make them operate, and we start adding additional lanes and additional slip lanes and those kind of things as an iteration to try to improve until the operations are amenable.
Sure.
So like I said, it's not, there's not a rule of thumb. It's just a iterative process you go through when you're coming up with the concepts or doing the analysis.
Hey Chuck, is there right of way for a shared use path on the south, or is that gonna require some logs to be
Well, and that's what I said. If you do the access management, if we go to the next slide, Sandy. If you look at this, we're closing the crossovers at these various intersections on the corridor. And by doing that, we can narrow the median. And by narrowing the median, that'll give us enough room on the south side. We'll shift everything to the north. We'll hold the sidewalk on the north side, but we'll shift the eastbound lanes to the north where we're basically taking up the median, and that'll give us enough room to put the shared use path on the south side.
Okay, cool.
So, I mean, we're trying to do the best we can to make it function well and provide definitely the facilities that the county's looking for on this corridor.
And there's also.
Chuck, has this been shared with any city electeds? I heard you say that Supervisor McKeel is excited about this project.
I don't know if they've actually I know Ben Chambers is one of the stakeholders group members, and he's actually seen this when we presented it to the stakeholders group, but I don't know if it's gone to anybody else in the city.
So, this is Bill Palmer. Chuck, so when see what you did there.
Yeah.
When we are like, we make a motion, or if we make a motion, does this go forward all as one full project with all 3 roundabouts and the shared use path or the alternative? Or is
Well,
this
we don't know right now. My suggestion was to have the county submit the roundabout at Georgetown and the shared use path and access management improvements along the western portion. And then the MPO submit the roundabout or the improvements at the interchange and the shared use path to the east into the city. And that's how we were recommending to break up this project. I mean, you could submit it as a bunch of projects, but I mean, a lot of this stuff won't work unless you do certain pieces of it.
Thanks.
Sandy, can you go look at like the east, I don't know if it's the next slide or the one with the next, yeah, that one.
Chuck, just to know, Barrett, would all the roundabouts be designed at a 35-mile or 25-mile speed, I guess?
I would probably try to go with 25 miles an hour. I know we're gonna have this off ramp coming from on the southbound side. It's definitely gonna have to be reconfigured because its free flow path is direct and it's not going to be. We'll have to do a lot of modifications when we get to design of these roundabouts. I know the properties on the west side, where that retaining wall is, it's got the mural on the side. It's probably going to be significantly impacted, as well as the house on the southwest quadrant. Both those parcels, actually, it might affect both those properties on the northwest quadrant. And then it may affect the gas station on the northeast quadrant. That one's less of a problem, and we'll try to utilize walls and stuff to try to minimize the impacts as much as possible. But we will have impacts to these properties with this scenario.
Okay, so if it is designed at 25 miles per hour between Georgetown and interchange, but that section of Barracks between those 2 intersections, 35, would that change 25 if you design intersections that are meant to be going through? Would the speed be the same? You just have slower intersections, but a faster straightaway.
We wouldn't necessarily drop the speed limit. But I mean, it's not something that couldn't be considered moving forward. I mean, it's a straight shot. We would just be narrowing the median and eliminating the crossover. So there's not a lot of restrictions on that roadway. So getting people to do 25 miles an hour would be problematic. So I don't know if we would arbitrarily do that as part of this study, as part of this project.
Okay, thank you.
I got 2 questions for you, Chuck. First, on the slip lane or on the crosswalks through the slip lanes over on the Georgetown intersection roundabout, are those concrete dividers wide enough to be to serve as pedestrian refuges, or are they just dividers?
Like I said, when we get into the design, we'll look at those and see if they're gonna be, right now, they look like they're striped out areas as opposed to fixed concrete separators.
Okay.
If you do fix concrete separators, it makes it the section wider, so we'll probably try to minimize that as much as possible. And we may even be able to pull those in tighter so there's not as much distance there. We do have the raised medians, which are the splitter islands on the approaches, but those ramps, dividers aren't necessarily raised.
Gotcha. Okay. And then the other question is, between the overpass and Georgetown, it looks like it's like about a half mile. And now that we're closing all of the closing the median all the way through, there's no place for a pedestrian to cross. Not that it's terribly easy now, but it's legal. And I have a feeling people are going to start to try to just run across. Is there any way to get like an RRFB signaled crosswalk somewhere in there? Is there a good spot for it?
We'll have to evaluate it. Like I said, we hadn't looked at that. I figured that question was going to come up. But we hadn't really had the discussion.
Okay, thanks.
Luis Cardona, quick question on the slip lane coming from Barracks, making that right onto Georgetown. So it looks like they're converging. So with the traffic coming off the roundabout, it doesn't have dedicated lanes. Is that correct, or am I just misreading that?
It doesn't have a dedicated receiving lane, so it would be a yield condition at the roundabout. But there's not a heavy movement coming from the other two approaches, so that I don't think that would be a significant delay. It just gives them more place to store because it is a heavy volume.
So Chuck, people traveling westbound on Barracks right now, they live in Canterbury Hills on the south side. They're gonna have to go all the way to Georgetown roundabout to get into their neighborhood.
Yes.
And Diane, so Supervisor McKeel was okay with that? She lives there.
Yeah.
Just curious.
We'll be more concerned about the cut through in the neighborhoods than anything else. So she says this will probably deter a lot of that. Even though it would be harder for them to do it, I think it would be more efficient and they would have less traffic going through the neighborhoods.
Chuck, can I reiterate a question? I just want to make sure I understand the answer. Coming, I don't know, I can't even see the word. Coming southbound, there's a slip lane getting into that roundabout, but you said the majority of the volume is coming northbound. What puts the slip lane coming southbound and not coming off onto eastbound Barracks? I know you said it, I'm just not sure I comprehended it.
Basically, go back one slide, Sandy. Okay, the westbound volume, which is going from the right side of the screen westbound, that volume, we have two lanes. You need two lanes to accommodate the traffic. Most of the traffic going westbound is making that right-hand turn. There's a smaller amount that's going through on the roundabout heading west on Barracks Road. So that's why the slip lane's there, to keep them outside of the roundabout. So they don't have to go into the roundabout to make that maneuver. The volume that's coming northbound from the development to the south and eastbound from the developments to the east that want to go northbound, that volume's not as great. So the westbound volume on Barracks is basically would have to yield to that volume. But since the volume's lower, they wouldn't get queued up. The southbound Georgetown to eastbound is the other heavy movement at this intersection. And that's basically going to be an exclusive lane. We had to segregate out the right turn traffic, which isn't a heavy volume, but it gave us enough. It took enough volume out of that approach that we were able to make the southbound to eastbound a one lane approach.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Hey Chuck, this is Tommy from Charlottesville. So to summarize this project, there's 3 roundabouts, could be broken up into multiple projects. Currently, there is a northbound sidewalk on Barracks between the overpass and Georgetown. And then on the southbound, you are looking at potentially adding a shared use path 8 or 9 or 8 or 10 feet wide that goes from Georgetown all the way to Emmett, with crosses at the exit and on ramps to the bypass. And my question, I guess, in addition to confirming I'm saying this correctly, is for the folks who are walking from like 29 or the city to Georgetown, there's currently sidewalks, but if you're trying to cross over the on ramps by the gas station, how do folks, oh, this picture does show that. One of the pictures, so is that the current situation or is that the proposed?
That's the alternative.
This is the alternative.
This is the alternative.
Okay.
I mean, currently, I think there's a sidewalk on the north side. There are some telephone poles. There's a lot of utilities that are sort of intermittent through that corridor. That's why we didn't look at a shared use path on the north side. The other problem is getting underneath the bridges. We would connect the sidewalks. There is like a 5-foot sidewalk underneath the bridge on both sides. It's from the curb to the parapet wall is the pier columns is 5 feet. So that's the only thing that's under the bridge currently. So we're going to connect to that with facilities that pedestrians could use. It's just really narrow and you're going to be walking right next to the travelway. So it's not going to be as comfortable. There's nothing we're going to do that's going to solve that other than possibly if we can do the roundabouts, we can fit a shared use path underneath the bridge. That's the other option. But part of this project is connect the sidewalks through this corridor. And I think here we're doing it. We're also doing it on the other side with some infill on the south side as options to the shared use path.
And the other option is a shared use path on the southbound and keeping the existing structure under the underpass, which is technically an old sidewalk there, or removing that to get your space.
It would probably be removed because we use that and the basically the lane that's there and that sidewalk. We'd have to put some sort of curb there, but we would take out some of that sidewalk to put the shared use path in. Because we do have to have separation between the shared use path and the travelway. So we want to make sure we have as much as possible there.
So folks who are trying to go west walking or biking, if it's a shared use path on the south side, would have to cross over Barracks and use the shared use path to do that in this option.
If you're traveling west on the sidewalk on the north side of the road, you would have to cross Barracks to get to the shared use path on the south side. If you're walking, you're going to have a sidewalk on the north side because there's one there already.
So it'll keep that north sidewalk all the way through.
We're not touching the north sidewalk. We're going to leave it in place. I mean, if we disturb it with a project, we will put it back, but we weren't going to do anything to improve it.
Oh, okay. That's my
The section in the city, this portion, that sidewalk on the north side, basically you've got the parking lots for these businesses right up to the back of the sidewalk. The sidewalk's there and it's got utility poles like right in the sidewalk. So it's not very good through that corridor on the north side. That's why we didn't look at it because we couldn't. It would be near impossible to put a shared use path on the north side. So we looked at the south side as the better option for this corridor. Plus it would tie into the Ravenna Trail, which comes up through this university property and ties into Barracks in this corridor. And then it would connect to what the city's already got funded at Emmett Street, eastward and southward.
Got it, thank you.
Do you
And
want
what, like I said, we will look for options to put additional crossings of Barracks Road in once we get to developing. That could be some comments you guys could add to the survey. Because there possibly could be crossings of at the interchange if we do put roundabouts in. And possibly even at mid-block crossing, but until we get in and evaluate it, I don't know at this point. But like I said, go ahead and take the survey once it goes live on Friday and runs for 2 weeks, and then get your comments in and make sure you let everybody know that it's going to be available for them to review and provide comments.
So in terms of the timing on this question,
Mhm.
do they need a recommendation from us at this MPO Policy Board, or is it something you can hold off another month and see how this survey turns out?
Well, I think we need to know whether or not we need to be working towards an application. You all don't need to commit to any of the alternatives, and there's no commitment, even if we submit a pre-application, that we submit the final application. I think, Chuck, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, we just need to have a general sense that we need to have this ready and queued up to prepare for a pre-application, correct? That's my understanding.
Next month, we'll see a final recommendation on how you want to.
No.
Is there a benefit of splitting the projects?
Next month, we can talk about that in more detail. We might have a better sense of what Albemarle County would be potentially interested in doing related to this project as well. And then we'll also have the public feedback from the survey in order to determine whether or not that could impact which of the alternatives the MPO wanted to move forward with.
Do you need a recommendation from us and from the policy board to continue doing work on developing these three as an application or as applications, or can we say, you know, we don't necessarily want to take a vote on whether this is a thing or not because we haven't seen it yet and our city councilors haven't seen it yet either, so they might be a little surprised by it.
I think,
but you continue working in the background towards that goal and brought it to them next month after, you know, doing public engagement and reaching out to our elected officials and having a more robust answer for some of like that questions we had. Then we might be able to vote and say, yeah, of course we recommend this, but right now there's so many question marks. How would I feel comfortable taking a vote one way or the other?
I think, Chuck, what VDOT needs right now is just a general direction that we do want to continue to move forward and tentatively prepare to submit these as pre-applications. We're not necessarily endorsing these as the final projects that we'll be submitting at this point, correct? That's my understanding, at least. You're not committing to actually submitting a pre-application, just on continuing efforts towards developing it.
So Sandy, while respecting the city's concerns, I think Albemarle County is ready to continue to move forward and investigate these two alternatives for potential submission.
Okay. And then any other feedback on this slate of projects as a whole?
I guess the question on the Louisa Road, Milton Road, not that I have a huge stake in either of them, is why not submit them if we have extra slots, even if they're maybe going to score poorly? Like, what's the harm?
The real reason is because of VDOT staff capacity and that they're unlikely to be competitive, and maybe that capacity will be better applied to other projects.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'll move forward with preparing the projects that are shown as recommended here, unless there's any other feedback otherwise.
the tiniest thing, Sandy.
Yes.
When we presented these projects to the Board of Supervisors a couple weeks ago, we referred to the second project on the currently identified list as the Panpass improvements package.
Okay,
And the other one is the Barracks Road improvements package, if you just wanted to use consistent language to keep our
okay,
things easy.
okay. Alright.
Worth pointing out, I had one more comment on the barracks, just a comment. Having lived in Canterbury Hills, and having made right-hand turns out of there, people coming from barracks out of the county, there's a speed transition from 45 down to 35. And if they hit that light right there, that's green, they just fly down. But if they hit the light, it's red, then it's all right, they're calm. What I like about this roundabout is they're gonna have to slow down. And it's just gonna make that rest of that corridor just safer. 2 cents.
I think that's all on that topic, unless there's anything else you all want to discuss.
So you don't have any recommendation right now, say over there, also board.
I think the general consensus was fine.
Yeah.
Give us that direction, yeah.
Next is Fontaine. Back to you, Sandy.
Do we have any updates on the Ivy?
Oh, there, okay, so I tried to look.
Tuck, do you wanna share any updates on the Ivy corridor?
Sorry.
We'll come back if he hops back on. Yeah, I think we lost him momentarily. So. If he hops back on, we'll come back to it. All right.
Oh, actually, listen, before we move on, one of the previous Tanya, are you planning manager of the county, who should be overseeing transportation and long range plans? So we're very happy to have her here. Want to get local and for yourself or anything?
This is literally week 4, so I haven't been here very long, starting to get names and faces and roads and priorities under understanding. So it's good to be here. Feel free to let me know or contact me if you have any questions or just want to say hi.
Tommy, could you spell your name for me, please?
It's Tonya. Last name is Schwarzenbruer.
I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah, SWARTZENDRUBER.
Thank you.
There you go, sorry.
Okay. I don't have a lot of specific updates for you, but at the previous meeting, we talked a lot about the Fontaine Avenue interchange project that was funded in round 4 of Smart Scale. And so as you recall, the concept that was funded was a displaced left turn at Fontaine, and one of the primary objectives of the project was to close the left turn lane south of that interchange to redirect traffic that was traveling northbound on 29 and wanting to make a westbound movement onto 64 from having to make that left turn across 29 southbound traffic. So at the previous meeting, we had talked about how VDOT was looking at some alternatives to the displaced left turn, and the other configurations that they were evaluating were some conventional intersections. So with the displaced left turn, basically traffic coming from the southbound interchange would come up through Fontaine. They would have pretty much a free flow right turn movement, and then anybody who wanted to make the westbound movement on Fontaine would need to make a U-turn at Racy Hunt. There would be a loon here. This traffic would be redirected make the roundabout here, and they could continue westbound, westbound. So there were some concerns about this proposed configuration, so VDOT went back and looked at what some potential alternatives were and came back and looked at some conventional intersections. At the previous meeting, the most up-to-date data that we had indicated that they thought that there would be an opportunity to convert these interchanges right here to a conventional intersection, but they needed to evaluate whether or not they could do that and still accommodate that left turn movement through this intersection and close the crossover. And so they were going to go back and do that evaluation. I do not have any updated data at this point. I have not received the operational analysis, but very preliminary results have indicated that they do believe that they would be able to accommodate the conventional intersections at the two interchanges, add a second right turn coming off of the southbound interchange, accommodating traffic that would be turning eastbound onto Fontaine, which would address the queuing that's occurring at this ramp right here. And that the operations for vehicles that would be making this left turn movement, both to return to the southbound ramp to get back onto 29 southbound and make that 64 westbound movement, as well as vehicles that would be traveling westbound onto Fontaine, that all of that could be accommodated through the conventional intersection, and that this configuration would perform through the future projection year of 2045. So at this point, this does appear to be the conventional intersection does appear to be a viable alternative. It would maintain all of the movements that are currently in place at the existing interchange, so it wouldn't have the redirection of traffic for people that are making that westbound movement or that wanted to come from the west traveling eastbound and make that right turn onto 29 north. So it would accommodate all the movements that are currently I guess that are currently people are currently comfortable and used to making. And then there would also be some additional improvements at Racy Hunt to try to alleviate some of the queuing that is occurring right there. But anyway, I think right now we will need to make a determination at the policy board meeting next month on whether or not we are in agreement that this is the preferred alternative versus the one that was applied for and funded in round 6. I don't have a lot of additional information, but if there are general questions or discussion, we would be happy to hear feedback on that from you all.
Did you say policy board next month or next meeting?
Next meeting, sorry. I might have said next month.
I put it in my notes.
This still contains the shared use path, right?
Yeah.
That was like.
The shared use path has to be included, yeah.
They haven't showed it on that concept, but I'm sure.
Right.
And that's the whole, like, from Racy Hunt all the way through the other side of the bypass, right?
There's already one along
On that
Racy
first,
Hunt, so
yeah.
I imagine would connect.
Yeah, it'd basically be facilitating it through the interchange.
Would it still be that median shared use path that is shown in the first alternative?
Median, I believe it's going to
Or
be,
on the, yeah, so I saw one that was in the median of between the two legs.
I believe it was shown on the southbound.
Okay. You just-
No, I think you're right, like at some point,
There was a-
when they had the divert. it was-
I remember seeing I guess, a concept that showed a median.
And the
shared use
reason,
path.
the reason was that because there was that free flow
Mhm.
truck U-turn. And so I think they put it on the other side.
Okay. So, okay, cool.
But that's not the case here.
And it would end at that intersection on the left, this shared use path.
The intersection on the left, yeah, the shared use path would accommodate like travel through this whole interchange.
Okay.
So they're also showing that extra lane on that south. So you can accommodate the two left left turns coming off the bypass.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering how that shared use path is accommodated under the bridge
How the shared use path is accommodated.
with those 2 lanes.
There,
Yeah, no room back there.
So there's 4 lanes currently, right?
Not currently.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, according to this
Yeah.
image. And currently, there's 2 plus a good chunk of right of way. Yeah, so that they're adding 2 lanes. On the east. and
Yeah, I
the
guess
west.
it would just be great to get a confirmation on that shared use path, and
Yeah,
I'm not sure when we would see that.
okay, I can find out on that.
Those turn lanes are really hard to cross as a pedestrian. It's dangerous.
Basically 3 lanes under there now.
Yeah, I think there's 2 and 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, it switches the,
Yeah,
yeah, so that one light, you know, where most folks are turning right onto Fontaine towards Racy Hunt. Is there a stop sign or stop light for those right turn folks as well? Or is it just for anyone else trying to go straight or to the left? Because right now it's a slip and people can just continue going, you know?
Yeah, it's I mean, this is the information I have right here. So it says single free flow right turn to Racy Hunt.
So no would be how we interpret that, right?
And then the light could control additional right turn movements from the other lane.
But for pedestrians on that shared use path going eastbound, there is no signal to protect them going across free flow right turns.
I asked this question to VDOT last week, and they said that they are probably going to be looking at doing rapid flashing beacons in those areas where there is a slip lane. They may also have to, put in a stop there that's activated when someone who's a pedestrian or bicyclist pushes a button. But that's sort of design phase kind of question.
Yes, instead of this operational analysis, that's the next step.
Which debatable whether this should be considered separately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be built in later, but I'm also curious, Bill, if that's where the Rivanna Trail is, and not to say that that's a lot of the traffic flow, but they're crossing Fontaine right there, not at the signal. I don't know, another photo shows it better, but everyone crosses where
There's kind of a
there's
scramble across.
right. That right, yeah, so you see where the driveway is there, Sandy, on the, and then everyone just goes straight across and then comes up on the trail behind the parking lot and yada, yada, yada. I don't know if there's any way to kind of explore additional pedestrian crossing there, essentially. Cause I have a feeling no matter what we do until people, hey, go across at the light, they aren't gonna do it.
There are some very, very early discussions about pedestrian overpass there. Like at the entrance of Racy Hunt, but that's very, very early discussions about that. There's still, UVA is more focused on what's going on in the property itself.
Right.
But something is coming in discussions.
So I think really the direction we'll be asking for from the policy board is the previous design with the displaced left turn, is that preferred over the conventional intersection, or is there agreement that the conventional intersection has a lot of the benefits and is a preferable alternative to what was originally submitted?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the queuing on the northbound ramp with the signal is gonna be okay?
According to the preliminary analysis, VDOT has indicated that at least through design year 2045, it should function. I don't know about that particular movement, but what I heard without looking at any of the data was that it would function better than the displaced left turn overall.
could you go back to the slide showing the alternative?
Showing the alternative, yeah, that one.
Sandy? I'm back on, sorry, my computer, we lost.
Oh, no,
internet.
at the time.
So, actually, we, over the weekend, we got some more preliminary information from Baker that's doing the analysis. And basically, the preliminary data, for the northbound movement with the U-turns included, U-turning truck volume, left turn, northbound, left turn movement for the trucks included, still provides acceptable levels of service in the PM and the AM. For the signalized option.
So, yeah, it should perform at an acceptable level.
So Chuck, this is Jessica. Just wondering when we would be able to see some data that really breaks down the operations like buying movement and compares the preferred alternative to the displaced left turn. I think the county wants to really express a lot of appreciation to VDOT for looking into these alternatives, but it seems like a disservice to all the work that you put into it to have our elected officials make an official decision without having time to review that kind of detail of data before making the decision.
I realize that. And like I said, Sean sent me this morning because I had another meeting. That's why I couldn't be there today. And he said that he had just gotten this weekend, over the weekend. So we haven't even had a chance to look at it yet. I looked at it this morning right before the meeting to see what the results are saying. So once we get more information, we will send it out. But like I said, this is what I've gotten right now from Sean and Baker.
Additionally, for that, I guess that left turn, if you're going on that northbound off ramp, I guess, but to the right, making that U-turn to come back down 29 to then go on 64, because they're gonna close that that left turn onto westbound. How would that left movement function in the peak hours if everyone has to do a U-turn essentially to get back onto 64?
Well, that's the movement I was talking about.
Okay.
In the VISM model they ran, it looks like you're gonna see acceptable levels of service for both those intersections in 2045 AM and PM.
Okay, and let's take into account the developments that are just south of there. Thinking about.
And this is based on the data that we've gotten. Now, I don't know what all that includes, but we got some additional development information from the university. And I know there's the Piedmont development that is just coming in. I don't, like I said, I don't know if that one is included or it was included in those numbers or not.
Okay, thank you.
But I mean, there is background growth included beyond what the developments will produce that would account for some of that already anyway. And I will say that we are going to look at another study after probably later this year to look at the 118 intersection, which is the 64 intersection. It won't necessarily look at this interchange, but we're going to look at that left turn movement as part of that study. Not that that's going to change this, but just to let you all know that that's something we're going to pursue probably later this year.
Thank you, Chuck. So again, I think the question is, do you all want to provide a recommendation to the policy board at this point? Or if you don't feel ready, I guess we do not have to provide a recommendation to them from MPO Tech.
I said it already, I don't think that we have enough information to make a professionally responsible recommendation, so I do not think we should make a recommendation.
Okay.
I agree.
Yeah, I think this needs to come back with more detail, obviously.
I would have to confirm this with VDOT, but I believe that they are going to be prepared to move forward with the project in short order. So I don't know that this would come back to this committee in time for there to be an additional opportunity to weigh in on a preferred option.
Do you think they'll have better numbers next week for the MPO Policy Board to evaluate?
And having the share use and everything.
Yeah.
Is Chuck now on? Can he kind of confirm?
I don't know. Sean will probably be providing that information. Like I said, we just got it over the weekend, so we haven't had a lot of time to digest it. It looks like the other option with the left turn, with the left turns being included, will still function better than the DLT.
So the alternative that we're looking at right now looks like it should still operate at a higher level of service than the displaced left turn, which was the original concept.
Correct.
I think what we need to, what needs to be conveyed maybe is that, like, yeah, when this comes to MPO next week, having those hard numbers of traffic counts and comparability, it's great. I've also heard we need to see a little more detail on the shared use path. Chuck, I don't know if you heard that part of the conversation, but we weren't clear where the shared use path was going to be located on this, or if that's been determined. And then,
I don't recall.
okay.
I know we're going to include it, but I don't know where, and I don't know how that will affect the operations either.
So that might be something that we could try to either, if we're able to provide a hard recommendation on where that would go, or at least discuss what the alternatives could be. It sounds like that's information that would be helpful to share with the policy board.
One more thing, Sandy, I think questions you're going to hear from the Admiral County supervisors would be wanting better information about what development's been included in the analysis, particularly development to the west of the interchange.
Okay.
West and south.
Yeah, I think that's important too, because when they had the loon option, I don't believe there was a full appreciation of how much development is happening to the west, particularly with the Regent School and what was happening at UVA as well at Fontaine. So which was putting a lot of pressure on that one intersection. So for that, I think that this is a portable solution.
Okay.
Yeah, I just toss in, I have a lot of concern about that right turn movement in the right lane going into Racy Hunt Drive. In the diagrams we've seen before, it's a full-on slip lane with a very wide turning radius. And I know VDOT told me the other day that that's not a design, it's just an operational concept. But we really do need to make sure that that is safe for pedestrians in a final design.
Okay. Like I said, there's 2 right turn lanes that go into Racy Hunt. I don't know from a design standpoint. Some of those may be dictated by the university since they're going to be probably making some of those improvements. The biggest thing is that we have to have a dedicated right lane from the ramp on into Ray Hunt, because that weave issue from that movement is horrible right now, and it's just going to get worse in the future. So
yeah, my concern isn't really about having the lane itself. It's just that if it's engineered like a free flow lane, even if supposedly there'll be some way to stop cars or to signal them to yield, people are just going to be blowing right through there. If it's a tight turning radius, like an actual right turn, even if it's, not merging with any other traffic. I think that will be a lot safer for pedestrians going along that shared use path.
Understand. I mean, the university is going to also put a roundabout just inside. They're going to relocate that crossover just inside the Foundation Research Park, and then they will actually put a roundabout there. So there would be an opportunity to, and they're actually showing a bus in their concept. They have a bus stop right there. Just inside, once you make that turn in, there's a bus stop that they're proposing, with a bus pull out and everything. So how this is going to function with what they're proposing to do, I don't know if that's been flushed out yet. But they are looking at a roundabout internal, so that the buses can come in, pick up, drop off, and then you turn at the roundabout and go back out into the city. But yeah, the weave issue that's going to be here, because you've got people making the right to go to the parking lots on the west side, and you got people going to the left that want to get into those parking lots on the east side behind the buildings. How that's all going to work in the future, I think it's all going to be tied into the roundabout. So the biggest issue they have now is weave between the two lanes.
As far as timing, I thought I understood that they need consensus on this from the policy board next week, with or without design and how that design affects operations. Because otherwise they need to move forward with the project as funded because of the stage. Is that correct? So whether this group makes a recommendation or not to the policy board will be making a decision next week, with the hope that they have hard data to look at.
That's my understanding, yes.
Hopefully the information that we've gotten, we'll be able to present to the policy board next week to help with their decision.
I can also pass along the comments from the discussion today to see what they may be able to address as part of that discussion with the policy board. Any other discussion on this item?
A little break. Chuck, while we have you, we missed you last time. Could you give us any updates, if there are any, about the Ivy Road pipeline study?
Basically it's running about we're scheduling the internal teams meeting to review the concepts. I actually just got a draft today. We'll be reviewing it on the not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And then we are scheduling the SWG meeting with the stakeholders group, which will include the city, the county, the university, to talk about Ivy Road alternatives. And then concurrently, we're trying to run the survey at the same time, or get it set up at the same time so we could get it out possibly by the middle of March, so we can get some public feedback. And we'll probably coordinate with the county of running their meeting with their citizens group probably about the same time frame as the survey, so that we can get feedback from both groups at the same time. And that's where we're at right now with that. So more to come. Like I said, I just got a rough draft of the presentation that we're going to review next week from the consultant that they're still working on, just so I can start looking at it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about Ivy Road? Cool. MPO targets.
Yep.
Back to you, Sue.
Sure, yeah. So just as a reminder, every year the MPO is required to establish safety targets, basically in support of some of these moving ahead for progress in the 21st century requirements. During our last update last year, we actually updated all of the targets. Most of the targets, we just have to update every 4 years. Safety targets, we look at every year. As a little bit of a refresher, basically what happens is in the Federal Highway Administration regulations, they set national targets that are established by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation. The slide up here shows what all of those targets are. And then each state has to set targets that demonstrate how they are going to support the national targets. And then each MPO has to establish targets that demonstrate how they are going to support the statewide target. So it kind of filters down. So basically, there's no real sort of repercussions for the MPO if we do not meet the established targets. Everything is evaluated at the statewide level. And the MPOs, we have the option to adopt the state targets or set our own targets. Our MPO historically has adopted the statewide targets, with the exception of last year, we adopted our own safety targets based on regional data. So I'm going to go through some of the data that was provided and then ask you all for recommendation on the safety targets that you would like to adopt for a region. As part of this process, VDOT provides a workbook that helps us understand what it would look like if we adopt different targets. And so part of this workbook included both a recent trend line and a long-term trend line. So the targets that we are adopting are the percentage change in fatalities, serious injuries, and then the combination of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. And once we adopt that average percent change, that will indicate what the projected fatality rate and serious injury rate will be in each of these categories. And that boils down to a number that shows us, as long as we stay below that number, we have met the targets. I want to make sure that I'm very clear to everybody in this room that while we may adopt targets that demonstrate that there are still going to be fatalities and serious injuries, this is a priority that we all consider when we implement our projects. One of the requirements from the state, though, is that the targets be adopted based on realistic projections and using data. So I think if we all have a conversation in this room, a lot of us would say that there's no number of serious injuries or fatalities that are acceptable. And from an aspirational place, we should all be striving for that number to be 0. So there's a little bit of a philosophical debate on what approach we want to take to how we set our targets here. So what the state did is, in addition to developing the statewide targets, and I have a table and I'll show everything in a minute comparatively, they also provided some information on what it would look like if we used data from recent trend lines. So that shows data from 2022, 2023, and 2024. These are rolling 5-year averages. So we could use a recent trend line, which looks at the most recent 5 years. Or we could use a long-term trend line, which shows data over a 13-year period. And they provided the workbooks that show all of those. So those are 2 scenarios that if we wanted to use regionally specific trends, we could choose one of those. We could use the state targets, or I developed one other alternative. So if we look at all of the different options comparatively, this column on the far right shows what the targets would be if we adopted the statewide targets, the same rates as the statewide. These 2 columns in the middle show the long-term regional trends and the more recent regional trends. And then in this very first column on the left, what I did was set an aspirational target. So as you all know, that our region is participating in developing a multi-jurisdictional comprehensive safety action plan. And the goal that most localities are adopting as far as that plan is concerned is a 50% reduction in serious injuries and fatalities by the year 2045, which means approximately a 2% reduction annually year over year. So the other alternative that I developed is not based on regional trends, but is based on working to meet that 2% annual reduction. That was not included in your packet, but I did want to include it for comparison purposes. So basically, the policy board will need to adopt its safety targets at their meeting next week. So we're looking for a recommendation from you all on whether you would like to support the statewide targets or adopt an alternative based on either the aspirational targets, the long-term regional trends, or the recent regional trends.
Targets in general seem aspirational in nature, so I might suggest that we go that route, especially as it aligns with our other work as the region for the Safe Streets program.
So your initial thought would be to use this first aspirational target column?
I think that makes sense, aligning it with our most recent commitments.
Sure. Anybody want to make a motion? Or is there any discussion?
I mean, if you don't have any discussion, make a motion that we adopt the aspirational targets for this upcoming year.
And I'll second it.
Yes, roll or all four? Roll for that one, or do you all?
Chair's discretion.
Okay, let's do support aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
against? Any? Cool. We're good, okay. Any abstaining, no abstaining, okay. I guess back to you, Sam, for unifying the planning work program.
Yeah, we're taking a first look at the Unified Planning Work Program for FY25. So hopefully this is a refresher for a lot of you, but just as background information. Funding for the Charlottesville Albemarle MPO comes from a combination of federal sources. We get 80% of our funding from the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration. 10% of our funding comes from our state organizations, and then another 10% comes from our local match contributions. Funding is allocated based on a funding formula. We actually just recently revised the federal funding formulas based on our most recent census. So the funding allocation for the Charlottesville Albemarle area actually went up a little bit compared to the previous funding allocation. Our estimated budget for FY25 is approximately $454,000. We do have the allocation, the final allocations on the Federal Highway Administration side. I think we're waiting for those to be finalized on the Federal Transit Administration side. It also includes some rollover, some passive rollover, approximately $36,000 from FY23. So if you're not familiar, any of the funding, the annual funding that we don't use, we can either program that funding to be allocated in the next year. There's a process that we go through to amend our Unified Planning Work Program, or if we don't do anything, it will passively become available in 2 years. So this is money that has passively rolled over from 2 years ago that we didn't spend down. What I really wanted to talk to you all about, though, is what we are sort of floating or drafting as our proposed work program for the Unified Planning Work Program in, I should say, FY25. One of the things that we're hoping to do through our long-range transportation plan is to identify some priority initiatives. And so based on some of the feedback that we heard, there are a couple of things that have stood out to us that we think could provide better information to help us to continue to develop a pipeline of projects. The administration tasks and the short-range transportation planning tasks, those are exactly the same as the previous year, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over those. The ones that I really want to talk about are the travel demand management study, the affordable housing connectivity study, and the pedestrian navigation of innovative intersections. These are some of the topics that we've heard over the last year and a half of developing our long-range transportation plan that we think would be valuable and would help us continue to identify the types of improvements that we want to see the region implementing. The travel demand management study is really intended to help us understand on a sort of macro or regional level, what are the primary improvements or objectives that we should be focusing on to start submitting infrastructure improvement applications for projects that will help reduce the amount of congestion and the level of demand for vehicular infrastructure within the urbanized areas. So we would really be looking at where are the primary generators of traffic, where are the primary destinations. We know some of this information, but sometimes there are destinations that maybe aren't associated with one organization. They're a little bit more cumulative. And what this would help us do is to help us understand where could some of these larger scale parking facilities be located that could help us manage the congestion, and then what kinds of service improvements and pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure improvements would be needed to effectively facilitate those movements from wherever that infrastructure is. This is really intended to be a longer term project. This is something that has been talked about by the city probably for, I don't know, at least a couple cycles of the long range transportation plan. This will give us some high level information that we could use to start actually working towards identifying potential improvements that would help us actually support those outcomes. So that's the first project that we could potentially undertake. The second project I want to mention is an affordable housing connectivity study. And one of the benefits of doing this study is that it would also help us work towards answering some questions that are coming out of the housing work that our staff also works on. But the idea behind this study would be that we could better understand geographic locations of where affordable housing is either being planned or already exists. A little bit similar to what the city of Charlottesville did in their comprehensive plan. They identified these sensitive community areas. So it'd help us give us more location-specific information, help us understand what are the primary destinations that people are traveling to, and that could help us identify what our priority multimodal improvements could be to support access for people who basically need additional accommodations or maybe need some additional equity considerations in order to reduce some of the stress related to travel to meet their job and maybe just quality of life destination requirements. So that's a high level for that one. And then the last one I want to mention that would come out of this process or come out of the questions that we heard from the long range transportation plan is this project focusing on pedestrian navigation of innovative intersections. As we just heard, there's a lot of questions that come up about like how does a DDI, how does a displaced left turn, how does a roundabout work for pedestrians? And so this would really be intended to be more of a literature review and a compendium of existing research that's been conducted to help us understand what the considerations are for pedestrians when we're considering an innovative intersection solution to address an operational or even safety concern, to make sure that the movement of pedestrians don't get left out of the discussion or aren't an afterthought. So those are the three projects that we would propose that are directly related maybe to some of the discussions we had through the long range transportation plan or otherwise recent discussions. The other things that I'll mention on here, the travel demand model, that is something that we will continue to work with VDOT to update because we're required to, so we need to leave that one on there. The Regional Transit Authority, this would be intended to provide for our staff to continue to engage in establishing and standing up a regional transit authority. And then, of course, we'll continue to support the development of the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan. So really, this is just very preliminary. Our staff is throwing out suggestions to you all and just wanting to hear feedback on any of these that you like or don't like, or general feedback otherwise on things you would like to see the MPO be undertaking in its next work program.
You guys are busy.
On the travel demand side, I think that's the one where you mentioned looking at opportunities for, is it structured parking or just parking? Is structured, I guess that's correct. Is structured parking part of that analysis, or are you just looking at opportunities for?
I think we're not necessarily going to get to a point where we're doing like feasibility studies. It would really be helping us determine what is the large scale need and what is the next step that we would need to take towards actually planning for that and making sure that that's in our pipeline of improvements.
Planning for structured parking?
Either structured parking or just travel demand mitigation in general. I think we've been hearing that this is a desire for a while, but we need to start taking some steps if we want to implement improvements based on that. We have good information from the university. I think we want good information from the urbanized areas more generally.
So, I mean, I would encourage that we look at, because you said looking at land opportunities, right? So as we look at those land opportunities, not just think about it for surface, but think about it for structured parking and, you know, where are there P3 opportunities as well, right? For those structures. We're in the AC 44, that is one of the issues that we're looking at. How do we densify our growth areas? So structured parking would be a great way of creating those opportunities for either infill or certainly densification. And I think it would be helpful under that category of travel demand management to look at structured parking as one solution.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's exactly in line with what we would do. Any other initial feedback or?
I have 2 comments. Yes, it looks like we'll be busy. It feels ambitious, but I also think it's important to note that like travel demand management study, affordable housing connectivity study, those would be multi-year. So this wouldn't be completing the scope within that first year for 50,000. That would be putting a little bit towards it now and then continuing it into the following fiscal years.
So,
and maybe that first year, I'm sorry, and maybe that first year is more about scoping out that project and trying to determine what will it include and what won't it include, and getting feedback in that scope to make sure that it's comprehensive enough to meet everyone's needs.
So Sandy, so I'm reading the packet here. It says this study will provide a high level understanding of travel demand factors and support the identification of longer term infrastructure and transit services improvements needed to support mode shift for those traveling into downtown areas. So when we're talking about like and this is the travel demand management study, and when we're talking about identifying the parking essentially, and is the talk circling around just car parking, or is it looking at other types of parking?
I think it's pretty open. I mean, this is just a draft, so whatever feedback you have is fine. I think that the way I was thinking about it though, is that there are a lot of people who have to travel into the urbanized areas. They just have to, they have to travel from other areas, and transit may or may not be a viable option for everybody that needs to travel in. The idea though is that I'm hearing though, is that we really don't want people using their vehicles within the urbanized areas. So it would really be, how do we get people to the urbanized areas? And then how do we figure out how to facilitate their travel around the urbanized areas without needing their vehicles? Is kind of what I was thinking.
So, oh no, go ahead.
No, I say the scope isn't set though, so it's really open to any feedback you all have right now.
I mean, really interested to know more about like, you know, what's going on currently and how it can predict VO and other permit holders for micromobility and potentially other bike parking, and where that needs to be and what does it look like, longer term bike parking, e-bikes, like personally. So yeah.
Okay.
Could you explain again the management study and the modal update for travel demand?
Yeah, the travel demand management study is really looking more at like where it's really looking at the origin destination information and figuring out where people are coming from, how they're traveling, and what kind of infrastructure improvements would we need in order to, you know, if we wanted to make a really strong policy decision that made it more difficult or more challenging for people to travel within the city, what kind of infrastructure would need to be in place in order to accommodate that? Versus the travel demand model is really updating a tool that we are required to have for the region. We can use the model to help us understand the travel demand. That they can be related, but the travel demand model we have to do regardless.
Danny, I'm sure you're aware that, you know, UVA we've done a couple PDM studies over the years, and you know, we're not an exact mirror of the region, but are similar.
Yes.
And so you might look at that for inspiration, see how we've kind of approached it.
Yeah, not just that, but also making sure that we use your data that
Yeah.
is already available.
Yeah, and just, if you move forward.
Yeah,
Been dialogue.
yeah,
We're happy.
awesome. I appreciate that.
Sandy.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Regional Transit Authority? Being new here, just trying to understand the context of that, what's going on?
Do you want to answer that, Christine?
There has been a multi-year effort to continue to regionalize transit, and by that I mean come up with a decision-making authority body on how resources are prioritized within the region. But it also is looking at potentially going back to the General Assembly and getting the authority to generate additional revenue in order to take some pressure off of general funds of city and county and surrounding counties. And so the Transit Authority is already has enabling legislation. It is allowed to go ahead and gather, just doesn't have the funding. A study was done in 2018, correct me if I'm wrong, that recommended the regional transit partnership be created as a bridge to getting to an authority to continue better coordination, communication, information sharing, to get to the point of an authority. So where we are right now is we just completed the governance study that would look at if there was an authority, what would be a governance model that would work, and also did really like the exploratory process on what are all the different funding options out there that other authorities are taking advantage of. What would be good options for our region to take advantage of? And then the next steps will be, is there consensus on continuing to move towards developing that authority and who is interested in it? There's quite a bit of work that would still need to be done, but that's where we are at least. Thank you.
Any other feedback? Otherwise, we'll use this to draft the final work program that will be considered, but any other feedback from you all? Thank you.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And it comes back. And normally that draft UPWP would come in March, but we expedited it so that it could be presented in February. It comes back in April in final draft for recommendation in May for approval. Is that the timing?
Usually we just have one preliminary and one final approval, so
In May,
it could come back in May or April.
if there are any
Yeah.
things that come up in between now, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, the long range transportation plan. So we are finally at a point where we get to talk about projects. So thank you all for bearing with me. Just a reminder, this is kind of the process we have gone through in order to get to the point where we have the prioritized projects. And you should all have a packet at your desk that have those for reference throughout this. So we started with our need identification process. That need identification process basically had a couple of different components. The first is that we did that data prioritization process that most of you in this room were involved with. And we also did a bunch of public engagement. So we took all of those together to start identifying where are our project priorities. Then what we did was we looked at what are the projects that have either been recently implemented, so that data is not reflected in the needs that we're looking at, or are already committed or funded projects. So again, there's already one of these needs that we identified as being addressed through an existing project. We wanted to remove those from consideration. And then we get those remaining needs. And that helped us look at what our priority projects need to be. Now, kind of the place where there was overlap between a project that had already been identified through a candidate project process, so through a small area plan or a pipeline study or something like that, that was really important for us to highlight. But I also want to make sure that it's clear that there are other priority projects that have already been identified, and we want to make sure that those continue to be priorities because of the way that previous project prioritization processes worked. We wanted to honor that process as well. So if there was a project that was already a priority for another reason that wasn't identified through our specific long-range transportation planning process, those are still high priority projects and should still be reflected in the plan. And we've been working with the localities to make sure that those are reflected appropriately. So then we get to a point where maybe we have a priority need, but we don't know exactly what the project is yet. And so those are going to be planning priorities. And planning priorities can also be be areas where maybe there was a need that's been identified, but we don't have a project lined up for that yet. So, but we want to start developing a project that would address those needs. And then finally, we have this category of unaddressed needs, meaning that they showed up in our process. We know that they're concerns, but we just don't have that. They're not the highest priority for the MPO right now. And maybe that's something we revisit in the future. So that's the process that we went through. So as you all maybe potentially recall, hopefully we went through this data analysis process where we identified our metrics. We determined how much of the weighting we wanted to put on each of these evaluation metrics that we use as part of the evaluation. This was all related to the data. We chose to use the accessibility focused weighting scenario. So that's what drove the data analysis part of this. And what you'll see on this map right here are the overall aggregate need scores. So originally we had used a scale of 1 to 7 for the purposes of sort of helping us work through this. We narrowed this down to a high, medium, and low category. So anything that shows up in this green was picked up as a need, just not necessarily a high need. And then we standardized the high and medium categories to show these are probably the needs that we want to make sure that we consider, and that even if there's something that's a low need, it's still a need. It just may not be picked up as a priority if we don't already have a project identified for that area. And then the other thing that we also wanted to make sure that we were doing is accounting for the future growth, as I think you had mentioned last month, Louise, is also looking at the future projected level of service. While I know that this group had, we'd had discussions about maybe resolving congestion isn't necessarily the most important goal on this. It's also important to look at congestion from a perspective of determining the multimodal improvements that we want to make sure that we're constructing, so that as congestion conditions get worse, we're providing additional ways for people to move around that provide an alternative to vehicular focused travel. So I think the 2050 level of service helps us understand where we want to make sure that we are building our multimodal networks. All right. So I'm not necessarily going to spend a lot of time on this, but one of the first things that we did was talk to the locality staff to make sure that we understood all the projects that are currently funded or have been recently implemented that address one of those, because we don't want to focus on those projects. So we screened out these projects. Most of them are screened out because there's funding committed to these projects. But a couple of them were screened out for other reasons. For example, this project at Angus Road at Route 29, we could come back and look at this. It's possible that there is an opportunity to improve this, but it's also possible that with a lot of the other improvements that are being committed at the hydraulic, as part of the hydraulic road bundle, that this issue could be addressed. I think through additional discussions, though, the primary concerns that we heard is that the issues were really related to private entrances that might not be something that we could address through an infrastructure improvement project. So there were those kinds of projects that got screened out, basically saying those needs are already being addressed another way, and so we're not going to consider those as priorities for this project.
Sandy, I think we got a mix up on one of the east ties. So
Okay.
that one that we have that's addressed locally, that needs to go back on the uncommitted needs list. We do not have that addressed.
Okay.
We do
I'm
have
about to
another
raise
section.
both hands about that.
Okay. That's why we show these in draft form.
Sorry, I didn't catch that earlier.
No worries.
But,
East High Street.
there is another East High Street on here. It's lower down.
Okay.
Yeah, that one is the one that we do have committed, working through. But east of Lowe's down.
Okay. All right.
And
We'll put that back on the priority list.
and then you're.
Yeah. Okay. So add that one back on. All right. So I put these on your at your seats as well, so you can look over those. But based on this discussion, we have our draft infrastructure priority projects. So these include all modes of transportation. It does not include transit service improvements, but it should include all bike ped projects and all roadway improvement projects. And then if there's anything related to infrastructure related to transit, like a park and ride or you know, an infrastructure improvement, we could add this onto this list as well. So, so those are the infrastructure priority projects, and then the transit service priorities is going to be in a separate list. So we are absolutely going to prioritize or include the high priority transit services. They actually don't need to be included on our infrastructure list, though. They can be included as priorities on a transit service list. And then we have our draft planning priorities. So these are projects that either we know are likely to result, they're either projects that are already underway that we know are likely to result in a desire for implementing some of the improvements that come out of these, or there are improvements that, or there are needs that potentially we want to make sure that we were addressing because we heard a lot of feedback on those and they showed up as a priority need through a data analysis. So one of the really interesting examples, I don't know if you saw this before this meeting, Bill, but we got a lot of feedback on JPA from West Main to McCormick, which is something we might want to have some discussions with the university on, just to.
So, Brandon, the north side of JPA there.
Yeah.
Sidewalk, we have a pretty big construction project going on right now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I think we have
tons of study of that, like plans that just have never been forward. So, yeah, if we need to talk about that, let's do that and bring Helen Wilson to my office.
I think we have a meeting set up at Julia next week.
Yeah, Julia talking about it really key.
That's great. So maybe we move this to a different list if this is a higher level of readiness than I realize, we can certainly find opportunities to move forward on this. But a lot of these are projects that are already in queue, but we can also add a different projects to this if we know that there are other priorities that we want to make sure that we're studying. And then this last list right here is unaddressed needs. So these are needs that were picked up that are either those higher medium needs that aren't addressed either through a committed project or a planning project or an infrastructure project. So these could go onto our list of potential projects regardless, but I did want to make sure that I was highlighting sort of the progression on how we're working through, how we're using the needs prioritization.
So this is the other list that I have a question about.
Okay.
So we do have a project on Image Street here, John Paul Jones, part of our streetscape project.
Okay.
But that project is not necessarily addressing that need for the level of service that you're identifying there.
Okay.
It's a streetscape project, so it's not adding more capacity to the roadway network there. And frankly, I doubt we have any plans to add capacity to the roadway network there.
So maybe we take that off the list then.
Or it's still a need that we need to address, but we need to address it with transit service or something.
Okay. Okay.
And just Emmett Street has one too. See it all. Since they have a right one.
Once, yeah.
Okay.
It's right at the bottom one there.
So really, the other thing I wanted to mention is some of the feedback that we heard. Because there are a couple places where we heard a lot of feedback and it just doesn't necessarily align with something that we can necessarily address right now. One of those was specifically in the Crozet area. We heard a lot of feedback about people wanting local sidewalks, and that's really when we're talking about the long range transportation plan and we're looking at the local road network and somewhere like Crozet, that's really talking about a local need, not necessarily something that's regionally significant. So I want to make sure it's clear. We heard that public feedback. We're happy to provide it to Albemarle County. That's not necessarily something that's going to be appropriate for us to address as part of this process, though. And then the other one that I just want to mention is is we did see a lot, there's a hot spot of public feedback that we saw on West Main. And that project, if you recall, was a canceled smart scale project. So at least over the next couple of rounds of smart scale, that's not a project that we could necessarily submit a reapplication for, but it is something we could put on the list just to make sure that it's clear that we are aware that there's a desire for improvements on West Main. So really, I included in your packets, if you want to look at those, again, this is a very draft development, but they're basically project descriptions for each of the improvements, and it kind of just attempted to summarize what the infrastructure improvement that was being proposed that those projects were, to give you some information on what the priority needs that were being that were indicated at on those road segments would be, and to provide just a little bit of context about what we're trying to do to resolve that if there's public feedback, or explain how the improvement would address the concerns that were indicated through the process. But really, I'm just presenting this all to you, first of all, so I can get the feedback, like what the city was providing on where maybe I did not get everything completely right, but also to see if there's anything that you see missing on the list, or anything that needs to be removed, or any adjustments. I want this to be a very iterative process, and to make sure that any concerns are well vetted before we get to the point where we develop the final plan. I think one question I have is, does Emmett have 2 T's or 1? 1 T. Okay. Any thoughts, feedback? Or do you want to just email us later?
No, I think that was really well organized. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
This is very helpful.
Thank you. Feel free to get in touch with us if you find anything later or have any questions. I think that's it down there. Okay.
It's.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go first for the staff updates. So for Safe Streets and Roads for All, we've been going to all of the localities to try and get resolutions of commitment to reducing deaths and serious injuries on the roadway network. Most of the jurisdictions are going with the same goal of a 50% reduction in deaths and serious injuries by 2045, which is the same as the state plan. With the exception of Charlottesville. Charlottesville has not approved theirs yet, but we'll go with a hybrid reduction of 50% in serious injuries and elimination of deaths, partially due to the lower number of deaths in Charlottesville to begin with. But yeah, that's ongoing. No other update now.
My next, and it's mobility management. So the mobility management program, we interviewed staff last week, and hopefully we'll hire somebody by the end of this week. We are still answering the phones at our 800 number. We are going to be conducting a survey through all of Region 10, targeted towards older adults and people with disabilities. It's just going to be 5 questions, and it's going to be about their travel activities, like where they travel to, can they travel, how often they travel, those types of things. We connected with John, so we're going to share that data with them. And I think that's about it for us.
You guys, different order we should go in. I have no updates from UTS or fucking transportation right now. Sorry.
you want to finish the staff updates?
Oh.
Table if there's time.
Oh,
I
yeah,
need more stuff.
there are stuff updates, it's true. Sarah. Yeah.
I don't have too much to update. We have started working with our consultant on our commuter assistance program, AKA CAP strategic plan. We are starting to receive some draft chapters, mostly data collection and just looking at demographics and things like that in the region as well. Rideshare itself is working on planning some spring events. We are looking to do some spring promotion around the Earth Month / Earth Day, as well as working with other organizations on Bike Month in May. And DRPT is getting ready to do a statewide marketing initiative for connecting commuters. And that should start probably mid-May. So hopefully you'll see some of our stuff out there.
Thank you, that's staff updates, now around here. Charlottesville, so that comment.
Tommy, I'll start off and I'll hand it over to you for anything I missed. I'll start with CAT. We are doing an update to City Council next week on the alternative fuel study. Hopefully getting them to a point where they're ready to vote on our recommendations. While we're working with that, we're also working on the CAT Transit Strategic Plan. There should be public engagement around that happening in April at this point. We'll be coming out with the recommendations from that plan, getting public feedback on it. The CAT Transit Strategic Plan is looking to pull together its system optimization plan from 2021 that never got fully implemented, as well as the regional transit vision plan, and sort of matching those two together to see where they make sense together, so that we have an idea of what we're spending DRPT's money on for the next decade. So keep an eye out for that info. I'm also going to be putting out our sidewalk priority list next month for public feedback. Right now, we're working through pulling together conceptual cost estimates for all of our recommendations that we're going to be putting out to the public. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be looking for lots of feedback. That will be out for about a month before we pull together our revised recommendations based on the feedback. We are currently scoping a study looking at our parking permit program. This is sort of in relation to, we just had our big zoning update, which eliminated minimum parking requirements, and the questions we got back from city council and from a lot of residents were, well, where are we going to park on the streets now that everybody doesn't have their own parking spaces on their property necessarily? So we are going to be looking at what our current permit program is. It's kind of depends on where you live, how it works, and what it actually protects you from. So we'll be looking at that more robustly across the city to figure out if we can make some adjustments to our parking permit program that'll make things a little bit more tolerable to people parking on our streets. And then I'm gonna leave some fun stuff for Tommy to talk about. So Tommy, you wanna?
I got some fun stuff. Number one, we've had 2 monthly walks. We had some folks join us on the last one, and it's going really well. So be on the lookout. In March, we're going to explore the Fry Spring neighborhood, and we might even dip our toes into the county and come back. Those are on the second Sunday of the month at 12 p.m. Also a great opportunity to do outreach. But I also posted on our biking and walking page for the city a Google map that shows most of all the bike parking options in the city. So the idea behind that is that you can now look at your Google map wherever you are in the city, find where the closest bike rack is to where it is that you're trying to go. We're going to try to pretty that up over the next couple months, including the website, maybe even put it on Esri, but spread the word about that because it's kind of a cool feature that most people didn't have access to. We only had a PDF map before this. So those are my fun things.
All right, I love the map right here, sorry. Tommy, you want to go first, Jessica?
Yeah, we don't have nearly as much exciting stuff as the city, but we did take our draft goals and objectives for the development area, transportation and land use section to the planning commission last week to get some feedback. It'll go to the board of supervisors soon. That's all part of our comprehensive plan update. What else to talk about? Oh, we are going to be releasing our RFP for the 3 Nudge Trail Shared Use Path Master Plan, the first week of April. So that is finally going out. Anything you wanted to update on for the developing area?
I'm working on a dashboard that's be both public facing and also for staff. That'll show current implementation projects happening in the county. So that'll be a tool for everyone to use to get more information about all types of projects, the VDOT, local, and everything else. So that's in the works right now.
We're a little bit behind you on that.
Yeah, you guys have something right now, right? Is it?
There's facilities have their own a little bit of projects, and I'm kind of pulling some of theirs into mine, but this is for project ranging from like sidewalk improvements all the way to the DES. This would be encompassing all transportation projects. Yeah,
And what stage are they gonna, so it's once they're active?
it's active, so
Planning or construction or?
essentially, yeah, it's things that have are in design, under construction, everything here.
That's great.
Is there any more MPO DPC updates? We covered that. We're good. VDOT, anything else Chuck wanted to add?
No, I think you guys, we covered it earlier, smart scale and those studies I'm working on, that's pretty much my life for the moment.
Thank you for your work. DRPT.
All right, I'll be quick. Just have a couple of updates. So DRPT has launched its DRPT Connects Businesses campaign, where Virginia-based businesses can discover the benefits of providing a variety of commuting options for their employees, and also learn more about the services provided by our commuter assistance programs, as mentioned earlier. So as folks are returning to the office or developing new hybrid work plans, we have some resources online at connectingva.drpt.virginia.gov, which will help some of those businesses and also employees understand the benefits and resources available for ride sharing, accessing transit, but finding alternatives to just the single occupancy vehicle travel. Next, we have a new smart scale dashboard, and I will share this document with Sandy so that she can send everyone the links that are included here. But we have a new smart scale dashboard on our open data portal for all transit projects that have received smart scale funding, and our team has done a really great job with it. I think it looks awesome. So definitely want to check that out if you're interested. And then lastly, as an opportunity mostly for our transit partners, FTA has announced a new NOFO for 2 programs, both the low no emission grant program and the buses and bus facilities program. So low no is obviously supporting the transition to low and zero emission vehicls, including the acquisition, construction, and leasing of required supporting facilities. And buses and bus facilities is a general program to assist the financing of, as you can imagine, buses and bus facilities capital projects. So there's a lot of information on that NOFO, the NOFO page, which we have linked. And we also have provided a link to DRPT's discretionary grant writing workshop for FTA, which we hosted in 2023, which still has very relevant information if anyone is interested. So unless anyone has questions, that's all I have.
I do have actually a question about the low no and the new NOFOs. I watched the, I guess the what they call. What is it?
Webinar?
Webinar, yes, thank you. Last week, and they mentioned that for rural localities, you have to apply through the state. So if we did apply for funding for, should that be through DRPT or through VDOT? You know,
that would be through DRPT. And if there's an interest there, you're definitely reach out to me, or I assume Katie Miller will probably be the best program manager contact, and we can help with that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Cat is, yes, you can provide a cat, we don't provide.
I think I already gave you some cat updates.
Cool. Yeah, John, Jason?
Yeah, we are still working through 3 concurrent studies right now, the Rural Transit Needs Assessment Study with North South Dakota University. There's a meeting in March, I think, next stakeholder meeting. Then we also have a bus, electric vehicle fleet and facilitation study being done by AECom as part of DRPT, and we're working with Dominion, who has received a grant along with others to put in electric chargers. We're figuring out work. The timing is good because the consultants are developing a transition plan, and Dominion's coming in with infrastructure, so it's kind of a nice marriage of the two. And then we're also undergoing in the middle of a microtransit study with AECom, also looking at possibilities there. Great, Scott, happy to be here.
I don't know what you build, anything else? Sorry about ambush earlier.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was, the more I thought about it, there's not.
Okay.
Cool.
Do you mind if I share something real fast, Albert? I think most of you in this room know, but for those of you that don't, this is actually my last meeting as staff at the MPO. I am going to be going over to work with Chuck at VDOT, so I'm still going to be here. I'm still available as a resource, but you'll have a different point of contact for the MPO meetings moving forward. For working with the PDC on transition, and I'm happy to continue to be available and answer questions as is helpful. But
One thing we can share, UVA was brought up earlier, and so is the work at Fontaine. So the road work has already started, that on Racy Hunt Drive, so that work has started. That roundabout will be completed. They'll work through the summer and will be completed in early fall. And that does include a bus stop as well. The garage work has started as well. There's some early utility work that we're working with now, and that's a 250 car garage. It does a bike parking, and it has I remember 13 electric vehicle charging as well. And that is going to be an intercept. It's parking for Fontaine, but it's also going to be an intercept garage.
Thank you, Sandy. Good luck and happy for you.
Yeah.
Exciting.
thank you.
Any more matter from the public? Either fine. All right, not anything else, I guess, looking to adjourn.
Second.
You guys work well together.